You are begging for love without opening your mouth. Have you ever noticed how some people walk into a room and without saying a word, everyone turns to look at them? And how others, no matter how hard they try, no matter how much they talk, no matter how hard they try, seem to take up less and less space? It's not about beauty. It's not about charisma. It's about something invisible, something you emit without realizing it, and that people around you pick up on before you even open your mouth. You may be smiling. You may be calm. You may even seem confident. But your energy, that silent frequency pulsing from within you, is screaming something else. It's saying, I need, I don't have, I'm not enough without this. And worse, the more you try to hide it, the louder that frequency gets. That's why the more you chase, the further away it gets. The more you wait for a message, the less it arrives. The more you try to be seen, the more invisible you become. It's not because you're not worthy. It's not because the universe is cruel. It's because there's a psychological mechanism operating in the shadows of your consciousness, and it turns all your effort into repulsion. Carl Jung, the psychologist who delved deepest into the human unconscious, called this projection, but not in the way you might imagine. It's not about blaming others. It's about understanding that everything you don't admit to yourself, every fear, every need, every unhealed wound, you transmit outward as an invisible signal. And that signal creates the reality you live in, not the reality you desire, the reality you emit. You don't attract with positive thoughts. You attract with frequency. And as long as your frequency is chasing, clinging, begging for confirmation that you matter, you are unconsciously pushing away exactly what you want so badly. So the question isn't, why doesn't anyone choose me? The question is, what signal am I sending that makes people walk away before they even get to know me? Because there is a frequency that repels, and there is a frequency that attracts. And the difference between the two isn't in what you do. It's in who you are when no one is looking, in the silence between your words, in the vibration you carry inside your chest. And when you finally understand that, when you stop begging and return to your center, something strange happens. You no longer need to chase, because everything you've been looking for starts to find you. But to get there, you need to understand where this silent desperation comes from, and why it's sabotaging your every move. Do you know that feeling? That tightness in your chest when the person you like takes a while to respond. You look at your phone, once, twice, 10 times. You know you shouldn't, but you look again. And every minute that passes without a response seems to confirm something you try to deny. Maybe you're not important enough. Maybe you said something wrong. Maybe deep down you always knew this would happen. It's not about that specific person. It's about a pattern, a loop that repeats itself in all areas of your life. At work, you try harder than everyone else, but you're always ignored when it comes to recognition. In relationships, you give yourself completely, but you feel like you're always proving your worth. In friendships, you're the first to ask, the first to remember, the first to care, but rarely the first to be remembered. And the worst part is that you do everything right. You're not dramatic. You don't demand. You don't complain. You've learned to smile, to wait, to give space. But underneath that performative calm, something is falling apart. A question whispers in the back of your mind, every day, every night. Why am I never enough? This is the frequency of despair, and it doesn't need words. It operates on a deeper level in the energy field you carry. Jung said that the unconscious never lies. You can control what you say, what you show, even what you think. But the energy that emanates from you, that doesn't lie. It carries the truth you don't want to admit. You're begging, not with words, with presence. Imagine a person walking into a room. They don't talk much, they don't try to impress, but there's something about them, a stability, a quiet fullness that makes everyone want to be around them. Now imagine another person. They talk more, smiles more, tries harder, but there's something uncomfortable about them, an invisible tension, a need that suffocates before it's even verbalized. People move away, not because they're bad, but because being around them is exhausting, because they emit a frequency that drains. It's not about being introverted or extroverted. It's not about being shy or confident. It's about where your action comes from. Are you acting from wholeness or are you acting from wound? When you act from wound, you're not connecting. You're proving yourself. You're not loving. You're waiting to be saved, and that changes everything. It changes how you speak. It changes how you listen. It even changes the way you breathe around someone. Jung called this the shadow, not the bad part of you, but the part you don't want to see. The part you push into the darkest corner of your consciousness and say, that's not me. But the more you deny it, the stronger it gets. Because the shadow doesn't disappear when you ignore it. It seeps out, it seeps into every unspoken word, into every heavy silence, into every expectation disguised as detachment. Have you ever entered a conversation saying whatever when in fact you cared so much you could barely breathe? Have you ever pretended you were fine when every cell in your body was screaming, see me, choose me, confirm that I matter? That's the shadow at work, and everyone around you feels it, not consciously, but they feel it, like a weight in the air, like something is wrong but no one can name it. And here's the most painful part. The more you try to hide this need, the more visible it becomes, because energy doesn't lie. You can smile, you can say the right words, you can even convince yourself that you're healed. But if deep down you're still waiting for someone to come and say you are enough, then you're not living. You're begging for validation. And that is audible in the silence. Jung wrote something brutal in his reflections. Projections transform the world into a replica of your unknown face. In other words, the world you see is not the real world. It is the mirror of your unhealed wound. If you feel rejected all the time, it may not be because people reject you. Maybe it's because you emit a frequency that says, I already know you're going to reject me. And unconsciously, you create exactly what you fear most. It's not your fault, but it is your responsibility. Because no one can change the frequency you emit except you. No one can heal the wound you carry except you. And as long as you keep waiting for someone else to come and save you, you will continue to live in the same cycle, chasing, waiting, begging, and moving further and further away from what you want so much. Because what you want is not far away. It's just vibrating at a different frequency. And as long as you're emitting desperation, you'll never be able to tune into what is abundance, presence, fulfillment. But there is a way out. And it's not in doing more. It's in stopping, in peeling back layers, in looking at the invisible signal you've been transmitting your whole life, and finally having the courage to change it. But why does this happen? Why does effort become repulsive? Why does the more you try, the further away you get? The answer lies in something you can't see, but everyone around you feels. The invisible signal you transmit. Imagine that each person carries an energy field with them. Not in a mystical sense, but in a psychological sense. It is the sum of everything you feel, everything you fear, everything you haven't resolved. Jung didn't use the word vibration the way we use it today, but he understood deeply that consciousness, both the part you know and the part you deny, is a living magnetic field. And that field doesn't respond to what you say. It responds to who you are. When you walk into a room, before you say anything, people already feel something. They can't explain it, but they feel it. There's something strange about this person. There's something heavy. There's something magnetic. This is not magical intuition. It is unconscious perception. It is the body detecting the frequency that the other person is emitting. And your frequency? It tells a story, the story you don't want to admit. If you're emitting from fear, fear of being abandoned, fear of not being enough, fear of losing, you're sending a clear signal. I don't have it. I need it. Please fill me up. And do you know what happens when you send that signal? People back away. Not because they're bad, but because no one wants to be responsible for filling someone else's void. No one wants to be anyone's savior. It's too heavy a burden. Jung explained this through the concept of projection. When you don't integrate a part of yourself, when you don't look at your lack, your fear, your wound, you project it outward. You turn the outside world into a distorted mirror of what you don't want to see inside yourself. He wrote, projections turn the world into a replica of your unknown face. Think about it. Have you ever had the feeling that people always abandon you? That you are always forgotten? That you are never a priority? Maybe it's not about the world. Maybe it's about the frequency you are emitting. A frequency that says, I already know you're going to leave me. And then unconsciously you act in a way that pushes people away. Not because you want to, but because the wound inside you is screaming louder than any words. Let me give you a concrete example. You start a new relationship. At first, everything is fine. You are present, you are lighthearted. But then, little by little, fear begins to whisper. What if he doesn't respond? What if she finds someone better? What if I'm not enough? And you start checking your phone compulsively. You start analyzing every comma, every delay, every silence. You don't say anything, but your whole body is tense. Your presence is heavy. You're no longer there to connect. You're there to protect yourself. And the other person feels it, not consciously, but they feel it. Like pressure in the air, as if there were an invisible demand. Confirm me, choose me, assure me that I'm safe. And little by little they begin to pull away. Not because they don't like you, but because the energy around the two of you is no longer light. It has become an emotional negotiation. It has become a silent cry for rescue. Jung said that until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life, and you will call it fate. In other words, as long as you don't see where this despair comes from, as long as you don't recognize the wound that is operating in the shadows, you will continue to live the same pattern. You will change partners. You will change jobs, you will change cities, but you will carry the same frequency with you, and the same frequency will create the same reality. Because it's not about what you want, it's about who you are. You may want love, but if you emit neediness, you will attract people who will either abandon you, use you, or get tired of having to fill a hole that isn't theirs. You may want recognition, but if you emit the frequency of I need to prove my worth, you will attract situations where you will always be challenged, always be tested, always be insufficient. Jung made a very clear distinction between ego and soul. The ego is the part that wants to control, that wants to guarantee, that wants to possess, that wants to prove. The soul, on the other hand, is the part that needs no reason to be present. When you act from a wounded ego, you always feel like you need to do something. You need to be chosen. You need to be kept. You need to avoid loss. But when you live from the soul, from your center, you don't need to chase. Because you recognize, I am me, and what is meant to stay, stays. And what isn't, was never mine. Do you know what the difference is? A person acting from a wounded ego is always in a prove to me that I matter posture. A person acting from the soul is in a I already know who I am and that's enough posture. And that difference, that shift in frequency, changes everything. It changes the way you walk into a room. It changes the way you look into someone's eyes. It even changes the silence around you. Because now the silence is not charged with expectation. It is full. It is pure presence. But getting to that place requires something that most people don't want to do. Look at the shadow. Look at the part of you that is begging, that is desperate, that is terrified of being left alone. Jung said, we do not become enlightened by imagining figures of light, but by making the darkness conscious. You will not heal by pretending that everything is fine. You will not change your frequency by repeating positive affirmations while, inside, you are falling apart. You will only change when you have the courage to go down, to look at the frightened child inside you who is still waiting for someone to say, you are worthy, you are enough, you matter, and then do what no one did for her. Say it yourself, not as a technique, but as a truth you finally accept. Because as long as you wait for someone from the outside to come and save you, you will continue to emit the signal, I don't have it. And the world will continue to respond to you with the same frequency, absence. And when you finally look at that scared child inside you, when you acknowledge that it exists, something unexpected happens. You realize that you are not alone on that frequency, that there are thousands of people sending out the same silent signal, begging for love without opening their mouths. And some of them have already been through this hell and survived. Not because they found someone to save them, but because they stopped waiting for it. Carla was one of those people. At 34, she had everything on paper, a solid career, financial independence, a respectable social circle. But inside, she carried a wound that no external success could heal, the feeling that in love she would always be insufficient. Her previous relationship had ended in a way that left her devastated. It wasn't violent, it wasn't scandalous, it was worse, it was indifferent. He just left. As if she had never mattered, as if everything she had given him had no weight. And Carla did what any conscious person would do. She sought healing. She read books, she went to therapy, she meditated, she wrote journals. She took care of herself with almost religious dedication. And it worked, at least on the surface. She was different, more confident, more centered, until she met someone new. At first it was light, promising, but then the pattern returned. Gradually, she began to feel that familiar tension rising in her chest, the need to check her cell phone, to analyze every word, to make sure that this time would be different. And inevitably, the person began to pull away, for no clear reason, no fight, just distance. It was during an intensive therapy session that the truth finally emerged. The therapist looked Carla in the eyes and said something that shattered her. Your energy isn't waiting for love, it's begging for confirmation. That sentence was a punch in the gut. Because Carla had done everything right. She had healed herself, or at least she thought she had. But the truth was more subtle and more brutal. She hadn't healed herself. She had only learned to hide the wound better. All that self-care work, all that rebuilding came from the wrong place. It came from fear. It came from the need to prove to herself and to the world that she was worthy of love. She wasn't living. She was proving herself. She wasn't loving. She was waiting to be saved. And that changed everything. It changed the way she entered into conversation. It changed the way she reacted to silence. It even changed the way she breathed around someone. Because underneath all that performative calm, the frequency she emitted was clear. Come heal me. Come confirm that I am enough. Jung wrote something devastating about this. We do not become enlightened by imagining figures of light, but by making the darkness conscious. Carla had imagined the light. She had constructed a healed version of herself, but she hadn't looked at the darkness. She hadn't confronted the unconscious belief that still ruled her life. I'm not complete unless someone chooses me. And as long as that belief operated in the shadows, she could read 1,000 books, do 1,000 therapies, meditate 1,000 hours, nothing would change. Because frequency doesn't come from what you think. It comes from what you believe in the deepest, quietest place within yourself. And Carla still believed she needed someone else to feel whole. That's when she realized all her efforts at healing had actually been a disguised form of control. If I heal myself enough, someone will finally love me. But that's not healing. It's negotiation. It's a sophisticated form of begging. And the energy that comes out of that, it remains the same. It remains neediness. Only now it's dressed up as self-knowledge. From that day on, Carla changed her strategy. She stopped trying to be loved, and she began to observe her impulses. Every time she felt that urge to send an unnecessary message, she stopped. She breathed, and she asked herself, am I doing this because I'm present or because I'm afraid? And most of the time, the answer was fear. Fear of being forgotten. Fear of not being enough. Fear that if she did nothing, she would be abandoned again. But instead of acting on that fear, she began to just observe it, without judgment, without trying to fix it. Just acknowledging, here she is again. The scared child, the part of me that still thinks it needs to beg for love. And something interesting happened. The more she observed it, the less power that fear had over her. Because fear only controls you when you don't see it, when you act from it without realizing it. But when you name it, when you say this is fear, it's not true, you break the cycle. You stop being the puppet of the wound, and you start to be finally yourself. Jung said that the privilege of a lifetime is to become who you really are. But Carla realized that she had never been herself. She had always been the version of herself that she thought she needed to be in order to be loved. The version that tried hard, that molded herself, that proved herself. And that version, it wasn't magnetic. It was exhausting. So she did the scariest thing anyone can do. She stopped trying. She stopped proving herself. She stopped waiting for someone to come and say, you are enough. And she started saying it to herself, not as an empty affirmation, but as a decision. I am enough. Not because someone confirmed it, but because I chose to believe it. And that's when the frequency changed. Not overnight, but little by little. She stopped sending out the signal, choose me so I can be me. And she started sending out something completely different. I've already chosen myself. And if you want to be here, you're welcome. But I don't need you to be whole. Do you know what happened next? People started to approach her, not because she was trying, but because she had stopped. The energy around her had changed. It was no longer heavy. It was no longer laden with expectation. It was light. It was pure presence. And that's magnetic. Because the truth that no one tells you is this: people don't walk away because you're not enough. They walk away because you emit a frequency that says, I need you to fill me up. And no one wants that responsibility. No one wants to be anyone's salvation. But everyone wants to be around someone who is whole, someone who doesn't need but chooses, someone who doesn't beg but offers. And Carla finally understood. The problem was never her. The problem was the frequency she emitted. And that frequency, she had the power to change it. Not by changing who she was, but by stopping pretending to be someone she thought she needed to be. But how do you do that? How do you change a frequency that operates in the unconscious? How do you stop begging when you don't even realize you're begging? The answer is not in doing more. It's in recognizing the brutal difference between two forces that seem the same but create opposite realities: control and presence. Control is what you do when you're afraid. It's the ego's attempt to ensure that nothing will fall apart. It's when you send that casual message just to see if the person is still interested. It's when you stay silent on purpose to test if the other person will miss you. It's when you analyze every word, every comma, every delay, trying to decipher what's going on in the other person's head. It seems like strategy. It seems like emotional intelligence, but it's not. It's desperation disguised as calm. And worst of all, you believe you're in control. But the truth is that you're being controlled. Controlled by the fear of losing, by the fear of not being enough, by the fear of being abandoned again. Jung taught that when an internal situation remains unconscious, it appears externally as fate. In other words, if you don't recognize that you're being ruled by fear, you'll continue to attract exactly what you fear most. Because the frequency you emit when you're trying to control is the same frequency as neediness. And neediness repels. Think about it. Have you ever stayed silent, waiting for someone to notice that you were upset? Have you ever pretended to be fine when inside you were begging for attention? Have you ever tested someone, consciously or unconsciously, to see if they would come after you? That's not love. That's not connection. It's emotional manipulation born of fear. And everyone feels it, not with their head, but with their body, like tension in the air, like something is wrong, but no one can put their finger on it. Control is the mask the ego wears when it doesn't trust itself, when it thinks that if it lets go, everything will fall apart. But here's the paradox. The more you try to control, the more you lose control, because life and people don't respond well to manipulation. They feel the weight, they feel the invisible demand, and they pull away, not because they're bad, but because no one can bear to carry someone else's fear. Presence is the opposite. Presence is not passivity. It's not giving up. It's not pretending you don't care. Presence is the courage to be completely here, without needing the moment to be different than it is. It's when you can look at someone without needing a response. It's when you can be silent without the silence being charged with expectation. It's when you act not because you're afraid of losing, but because you genuinely want to. Jung described presence as living from the self, the true center of who you are. Not the ego that wants to prove, possess, guarantee, but the soul that simply exists, without needing a reason, without needing validation. He wrote, "Freedom extends only to the limits of our consciousness. If you are not aware that you are acting out of fear, you are not free. You are a reflection of the wound that never healed." And here's the difference. When you act from control, you are always in a defensive posture. What if I lose? What if it's not enough? What if I'm abandoned again? Every action is an attempt to avoid pain. But when you act from presence, you are in a posture of openness. Whatever will be, and whatever won't be was never mine. It's not resignation, it's trust, not in someone else, but in yourself. Let me give you a concrete example. You're getting to know someone. The person takes a few hours to respond. If you're acting from a place of control, your mind races. Why haven't they replied? Did I do something wrong? Are they talking to someone else? And you start creating narratives, checking social media, imagining scenarios. And then, when the person finally replies, you act. Maybe with a quick response to show that you weren't expecting it either. Maybe with a cold response to balance the game. That's control. It's the ego trying to make sure you don't come across as the weak one in the relationship. Now imagine the same situation, but you're acting from presence. The person takes a while to respond. You feel the urge to check your phone. You feel the anxiety rising. But instead of acting, you breathe. You recognize, here's the fear again. And then you choose not to react. Not because you're repressing it, but because you know that impulse doesn't come from who you really are. It comes from the scared child who still thinks they need to prove themselves. And when the person responds, you respond genuinely. Not to play a game, but because you genuinely want to connect. See the difference? In the first scenario, you're being controlled by fear. In the second, you're present with yourself. And that difference is, as subtle as it may seem, completely changes the energy you emit. In the first, you emit tension. In the second, you emit calm. And calm is magnetic. Jung warned that the wounded ego always seeks to control what the soul has not yet integrated. And that's why you'll keep trying to control until you finally look at the wound and say, I see you. I know you're afraid, but I don't have to act from you anymore. And that recognition, that awareness, is the first step to freedom. Because control is a prison. You think you're in charge, but you're just reacting to fear. Presence, on the other hand, is when you finally stop. You stop reacting. You stop defending yourself. You stop trying to guarantee. And you simply exist, not because you gave up, but because you finally trust. Not in someone else, but in yourself. And that trust, it doesn't fall from the sky. It doesn't come from reading a text or watching a video. It comes from practice. From observing your impulses 1,000 times and 1,000 times, choosing not to act on them, until one day you realize you no longer need to control because you are whole. And when you are whole, you don't attract through effort. You attract through presence. If you've made it this far, I know this is touching something in you, something you felt but couldn't name. And if you want to continue this journey, if you really want to understand how to return to your center, subscribe to the channel, because what comes next will show you exactly how to stop begging and start radiating. And that changes everything. But presence doesn't appear magically. It's not a reward that falls into your lap when you read the right words or understand the concept. Presence is a result, the result of something very specific, the radical ability to stop reacting, to stop controlling, to stop pretending you're not afraid, and just be here, completely, without running away from yourself. And that's much harder than it sounds, because we've been conditioned to react, to solve, to act so that pain does not reach us. Presence requires the opposite, feeling the pain, recognizing the fear, looking at the wound, and doing absolutely nothing but being present with it, without trying to fix it, without trying to explain it, just existing there, completely vulnerable, completely aware. Jung described this as the process of individuation, the journey of becoming whole, not better, not more healed, not more evolved, just whole. And being whole means integrating everything, the light and the shadow, fear and courage, lack and fullness. He wrote, "The self is not only the center, but also the totality that embraces both the conscious and the unconscious. You don't become magnetic by eliminating parts of yourself. You become magnetic by accepting all of them. But accepting does not mean agreeing. It does not mean surrendering to the pattern. Accepting means looking at the part of you that is begging and saying, I see you. I understand why you are afraid, but I will no longer act from you." And that look, that recognition, is what changes the frequency. Daniela understood this in a painful way. For years, she repeated the same cycle. She would meet someone, she would get excited, and then she would let anxiety take over. She would start analyzing every message, every pause, every change in tone. She would wait for positive reactions to feel secure, and inevitably she would burn out. And the other person would pull away, not because they didn't like her, but because the energy around them had become too heavy. That's when Daniela made what she called a radical decision to be still. She didn't withdraw from life. She didn't shut herself off, but she distanced herself from the reaction. She stopped chasing connection. She stopped strategizing. And she began every day to simply practice presence in her body, in her breathing, in her heartbeat, in the silent space within her that needed nothing to exist. At first, it was unbearable, because when you stop distracting yourself, when you stop reacting, everything you were avoiding comes to the surface. The fear of being abandoned, the loneliness she had carried since childhood, the belief that she needed to prove herself to be loved. All of this came up, and Daniela didn't run away. She stayed, she breathed, and she let the fear exist without trying to kill it with action. And something strange happened. Little by little, very little by little, she realized that she didn't need an answer to feel good. She didn't need external validation to know she was on the right path. She didn't need anyone to confirm that she mattered, because she had stopped asking the world that question, and she had started answering it for herself. Presence is not about feeling peace all the time. Presence is about being here even when it hurts, even when it's uncomfortable, even when everything inside you is screaming, do something, and you breathe, and you do nothing. You just exist. Jung taught that the soul does not ask for your loyalty to what is comfortable. It asks for your loyalty to the truth. And the truth is that you've spent your whole life running away from yourself, running away from fear, running away from loneliness, running away from the feeling of not being enough. And all that effort to escape created exactly what you feared most, a life where you are never really present, where you are always running, always proving yourself, always begging. But when you stop, when you finally have the courage to stand still and feel everything you were avoiding, something changes. You realize that fear won't kill you, loneliness won't destroy you, and the feeling of not being enough, it's just a story you told yourself so many times that you started to believe it was true. And here's the secret. Presence isn't something you achieve, it's something you reveal, because you've always been here. You were just hiding behind masks, behind strategies, behind a version of yourself that you thought you needed to be in order to be loved. And when you take all that away, when you stop performing and just exist, what's left is you, pure, whole, present. And this version of you, it doesn't need to chase anything, because it emits a completely different frequency, not of neediness, not of fear, but of fulfillment, of someone who is comfortable with themselves, of someone who doesn't need but chooses. And that's irresistible. Think of someone you know who has this quality, who walks into a room and without doing anything, everyone turns around. Not because that person is trying to get attention, but because they are completely present. They are not in the past lamenting. They are not in the future worrying. They are here, now. And that creates a magnetic field around them, because presence is rare. In a world where everyone is running, standing still is revolutionary. Jung wrote, "The privilege of a lifetime is to become who you really are. But you will never become who you really are while you are running after validation, while you are proving yourself, while you are trying to be the version of yourself that you think others will love. Because that version, it's not you, it's a mask. And no one connects with masks. People connect with presence. So the question isn't how do I become more present? The question is what am I doing that prevents me from being present? And the answer most of the time is you're running, you're reacting, you're trying to control. And all of that takes you away from yourself. Daniela realized this, and she stopped. Not because she found a magic technique, but because she finally had the courage to stand still, to do nothing, to just be. And from that stillness, that radical presence, something was born that she had never felt before. The feeling that she was enough. Not because someone confirmed it, but because she had finally stopped asking. And when you stop asking, am I enough, to the world, you can finally hear the only answer that matters. The one that comes from within. And that answer is always the same. You always have been. But there's still one piece missing. A piece that most people never want to look at. Because it's the most painful. It's the part where you realize that you're not just begging for love from others. You're begging from yourself. You're betraying yourself every day. And you don't even realize it. Vibrational detachment isn't about letting go of people. It's about letting go of the version of yourself that thinks you need to betray yourself to be loved. It's about stopping abandoning yourself every time someone else comes along. Stop changing who you are. Stop silencing what you feel. Stop pretending that everything is fine when it's not. Because every time you do that, every time you betray yourself, you send a clear signal. I don't respect myself. Please do the same. And people do, not because they're cruel, but because you taught them to treat you that way. You showed them that you're willing to abandon yourself, and they just followed your example. Jung said that until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life, and you will call it fate. And the unconscious you need to make conscious now is this. You're asking for permission to exist, and as long as you ask, no one will give it to you. Think about the times you silenced what you wanted to say because you were afraid of upsetting someone. The times you pretended you didn't care when inside you were broken. The times you accepted less than you deserved because you were afraid of being alone. Each of those times, you weren't being understanding. You were betraying yourself. And each betrayal reinforced the frequency of neediness. Because you were saying to yourself, I don't matter enough. What I feel is not valid. I need to diminish myself to be accepted. And here's the brutal truth. No one will value you if you don't value yourself. No one will respect you if you don't respect yourself. No one will choose you if you don't choose yourself. Because the frequency you emit doesn't start with others. It starts with you. And if you're betraying yourself, you're emitting, I'm not worthy of loyalty, not even my own. Vibrational detachment is when you finally say, enough. Not aggressively, not reactively, but clearly and firmly. I'm not going to betray myself anymore. I'm not going to pretend anymore. I'm not going to diminish myself to fit what you expect of me. This is who I am. And if it's not enough for you, that's fine. But it's enough for me. And that decision, that radical loyalty to yourself, changes everything. Because for the first time, you are no longer negotiating your existence. You are no longer asking permission to be who you are. You simply are. And whoever wants to stay, stays. And whoever doesn't, it's not their place. And that's okay. But getting to this place takes practice. It requires you to observe 1,000 times the impulse to betray yourself. The impulse to say yes when you want to say no. The impulse to laugh at a joke that offended you. The impulse to accept crumbs and pretend it's a feast. And every time you observe that impulse and choose not to act on it, every time you choose your truth over the approval of others, you change the frequency. A simple practice. For the next 3 minutes of restlessness, do nothing. Don't send that unnecessary message. Don't check the person's status. Don't try to control what the other person is feeling. Just breathe. And ask yourself, am I doing this out of presence or out of fear? And if the answer is fear, don't do it. Wait. Let the impulse pass. Because the impulse always passes. And when it passes, what's left is you. Without the mask, without the strategy. Just you. And create a daily space of silence. 10 minutes. No screen. No one else. Just you and your breath. And in that space, whisper to yourself, I don't pursue. I don't cling. I am present. You don't have to believe it right away. But repeat it. Until the new frequency is imprinted on your body. Until you no longer need to remember. Until it is simply who you are. Jung warned that the journey of individuation, of becoming whole, is the scariest thing anyone can do. Because it means looking at all the parts of yourself that you've always rejected and saying, you are also part of me. It means stopping being who you think you should be and starting to be who you really are. And that's terrifying because it means losing the approval of people who only accepted you while you were wearing a mask. But here's the secret. When you stop chasing approval, when you stop begging for validation, when you finally choose yourself, the right people show up. Not because you attracted them, but because you were finally vibrating at your true frequency. And the people who resonate with that frequency find you. Not because you tried hard, but because you stopped. Vibrational detachment is not coldness. It is not indifference. It is the deepest form of love. Because it is when you finally love yourself enough not to betray yourself. And when you don't betray yourself, you don't allow others to betray you. Not because you fight, not because you demand it, but because you simply don't accept it. And those who don't respect that have no place in your life. And that's okay, because you are no longer living to be chosen. You are living because you have already chosen yourself. And that is the frequency that no one can ignore. And when you finally stop, when you really stop chasing, controlling, begging, something happens that seems magical, but it's not. It's just a return to your original nature. You begin to radiate. Radiating is not doing. It's not a technique. It's not a strategy. Radiating is what happens when you are so whole, so present, so at peace with yourself that your mere existence becomes magnetic. You don't have to attract anything. You don't have to prove anything. You just exist. And the right people, opportunities, and connections find you. Not because you deserved it, but because you finally stopped sending out the signal of lack and you started sending out fullness. Jung wrote that the world does not respond to what you want, but to what you are. And throughout your life, you try to want the right things, to want to be loved, to want to be seen, to want to be enough. But wanting doesn't change anything, because the world doesn't hear your desires. It senses your frequency. And if your frequency says, I don't have, the world responds with absence. But when your frequency says, I am, the world responds with presence, with real connections, with love that doesn't need to be begged for. Have you noticed how some people don't need to talk much, but when they do, everyone listens? How they don't need to try hard, but have a presence that fills the room? It's not charisma. It's not performative confidence. It's wholeness. It's someone who is no longer fragmented between who they are and who they think they should be. It's someone who has stopped betraying themselves. And when you stop betraying yourself, you emit a clarity that is unmistakable. And here's the final twist. You never needed to attract anything. You just needed to stop repelling. Because neediness repels. Desperation repels. The need for control repels. But presence attracts. Not because you did something right, but because you finally stopped doing everything wrong. And that doesn't mean you'll get everything you've ever wanted. Some people will leave. Some doors will close. But the ones that stay, those are the right ones. The ones that resonate with who you really are. Not with the mask. Not with the edited version. With you. Raw. Real. Whole. Jung said that the privilege of a lifetime is to become who you really are. And you spend your whole life trying to be someone else. The version that doesn't bother anyone. The version that doesn't demand. The version that molds itself to fit. But that version, it was never magnetic. It was always exhausting. Because living outside of yourself is the most brutal form of loneliness. You can be surrounded by people and still feel completely alone. Because no one is seeing you. They're seeing the mask. And you know it. And that hurts more than any rejection. But when you finally take off the mask, when you finally say, this is who I am, and if it's not enough, that's okay, you discover something unexpected. You discover that it was enough all along, that the problem was never you. It was the frequency you were emitting. And that frequency, it changed the moment you stopped betraying yourself. So it's not about attracting, it's about radiating. It's about being so present with yourself that you don't need anything from the outside to feel whole. And when you're whole, you don't emit lack, you emit fullness. And fullness is the most magnetic thing there is. Because people don't want to be around those who have all the answers. They want to be around those who are at peace with the questions. People don't want to be around those who are perfect. They want to be around those who are real. And you can only be real when you stop pretending, when you stop performing, when you stop begging, and simply exist. And that existence, that radical presence, is what changes everything. Not because you did something extraordinary, but because you finally came home, to the center of yourself, where you never had to chase, where you never had to prove yourself, where you were always enough. You just forgot. And now you remember. You don't need to be chosen, because you've already chosen yourself. And that's the frequency that no one can resist. Not because you're trying to attract, but because you're simply being. And being is without masks, without strategies, without fear, is the most powerful thing you can do. So stop chasing, stop begging, stop betraying yourself, and return to the only place you've ever belonged, within yourself. And from there radiate, not because you want something, but because you are finally someone. And that someone has always been enough. Now tell me, what part of you is still begging for confirmation? And you've only just realized it? If you've made it this far, you've already taken a step beyond most people. You watch the videos. You reflect on each idea. Now the question is, how far do you want to go with this? If you want to take the next step and truly apply this knowledge to your life, the codes of the White Rabbit are ready for you. The link is in the video description. Remember, success is a decision. The choice is yours. Count on me and follow the White Rabbit.